Finally, your house is mine, my sister declared in court. My parents applauded. I stayed silent until the judge looked up and said, "One of the 12 properties I see, I'd like to take a look." The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Angela's triumphant smile froze on her face. For months, she had been telling everyone I was nothing but a construction worker, living off our grandmother's charity. She had no idea what I had really been building all these years. 6 months earlier, my world had started crumbling when Angela discovered what our grandmother Ruth left me in her will. I was 32 years old, working construction and flipping houses in Portland, Oregon, when the call came that would destroy my family forever. "Donald, we need to talk," Angela had said over the phone, her voice carrying that familiar edge of superiority she had perfected since childhood. As the eldest at 35, she had always acted like she knew better than everyone else. Her marketing executive salary and designer clothes gave her the confidence to speak down to me, the middle child, who worked with his hands instead of sitting behind a desk. The family meeting happened at our parents' house on Maple Street, the same dining room where we had shared countless meals growing up. Frank and Margaret. My parents sat at opposite ends of the polished oak table, while Angela paced by the window. Tyler, my younger brother at 28, was still finishing medical school, so it was just the four of us. Grandma Ruth left Donald the house. Angela announced throwing the legal documents onto the table like an accusation. The entire property on Cedar Lane, not divided equally among her 3 grandchildren, just him. My parents exchanged glances, and I could see the confusion in their eyes. Frank adjusted his reading glasses and picked up the will, scanning the pages with the careful attention he gave to his accounting work. Margaret twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she had developed over 40 years of marriage. "I don't understand," my mother said quietly. "Why would she do that?" I tried to explain, but the words felt inadequate. She said I was the only one who understood what that house meant. I spent every summer there from the time I was 12 until I graduated high school. While Angela was at cheerleading camps and Tyler was playing baseball, I was helping Grandma Ruth repair the roof, paint the shutters, and tend her garden. Angela whirled around, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. "That's exactly what I mean. You manipulated an old woman. You took advantage of her loneliness and convinced her to leave you everything." "That's not what happened." I protested, but I could already see the doubt creeping into my parents' faces. Angela had always been the golden child, the one who brought home perfect report cards and dated the quarterback. She had graduated summa cum laude from the University of Oregon and built a successful career in Portland's competitive marketing scene. Next to her accomplishments, my construction work and house flipping looked humble, even suspicious. Think about it logically. Angela continued, moving into full presentation mode. Donald spent all that time with her because he knew she had money. He was planning this inheritance grab for years. Tyler arrived that evening, still wearing his scrubs from his medical school rotations at Oregon Health and Science University. At 28, he had inherited our father's gentle nature and our mother's trusting disposition. When Angela explained the situation, his face showed the same confusion and concern I had seen in our parents. "Maybe we could work something out," Tyler suggested diplomatically. "Split the inheritance 3 ways like Grandma probably intended." But Angela wasn't interested in compromise. Over the following weeks, she began building her case systematically. She hired Bradley Patterson, one of Portland's most aggressive probate attorneys, to contest the will on grounds of undue influence. She gathered character witnesses who would testify that I had isolated our grandmother from the rest of the family. The truth was more complicated than Angela's narrative. Grandma Ruth had been a shrewd businesswoman who owned a successful florist shop for 40 years. She understood people, and she had watched her 3 grandchildren grow up with clear eyes. Angela visited only on holidays and birthdays, usually arriving late and leaving early to attend more important social engagements. Tyler was devoted to his studies and had little time for family visits. I was the one who showed up every weekend to help with household projects, who listened to her stories about building her business from nothing, who learned her practical wisdom about money and investing. Money doesn't make you rich, she used to tell me while we worked together in her workshop behind the house. Smart decisions make you rich. And smart decisions start with understanding what really matters. But sitting in that courtroom 6 months later, watching my family's lawyer, Sarah Williams, fumble through her presentation, I realized none of that mattered now. Sarah seemed nervous and unprepared compared to Bradley's polished confidence. She stumbled over basic facts and failed to present the emotional evidence that would have shown why Grandma Ruth chose me. Angela sat at the plaintiff's table looking perfectly composed in her charcoal business suit, occasionally whispering instructions to Bradley. My parents sat behind her in the gallery, nodding along as Bradley painted me as a manipulative opportunist who had taken advantage of an elderly woman's affection. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. During a brief recess, I saw Sarah Williams step outside and immediately begin an intense conversation with Bradley Patterson. They stood close together by the courthouse steps, and their body language looked far too familiar for opposing counsel. Sarah glanced back toward the courthouse entrance, saw me watching, and quickly ended the conversation. That's when I realized the fix was in. My own lawyer had been compromised, and I was facing this battle completely alone. The confrontation with Sarah Williams happened in her downtown Portland office the next morning. The space was meant to inspire confidence with its floor-to-ceiling law books and mahogany desk, but I could see the guilt written across her face the moment I walked in. "I saw you talking to Bradley Patterson yesterday," I said without preamble, settling into the leather chair across from her desk. "Want to explain what that was about?" Sarah was a woman in her early 40s who had built a decent reputation handling estate disputes. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and she wore the kind of conservative navy suit that was supposed to project authority. But her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. Donald, I think there might be some misunderstanding," she began, but I cut her off. "No misunderstanding. I've been watching you for weeks. You're not fighting for me. You're going through the motions while my sister destroys my life piece by piece." The facade crumbled completely. Sarah put her head in her hands and began to speak in a broken whisper. "Angela offered me a $50,000 bonus if I made sure you lost this case. She said it was just about fairness, making sure the inheritance got divided equally like it should have been in the first place." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I had trusted this woman with my entire future, and she had sold me out for money. "You're fired," I said, standing up and heading for the door. "Donald, wait," Sarah called after me. "I can fix this. I can make it right." But I was already gone, walking out into the gray Portland morning with only 3 weeks until the final court date and no legal representation. Finding a new attorney on such short notice felt impossible. Most of the good probate lawyers in Portland either knew Angela through her business connections or were unwilling to take on a case that was already in progress. Finally, Marcus Thompson agreed to meet with me at his office in the Pearl District. Marcus was a tall, lean man in his late 50s with graying hair and the kind of steady confidence that comes from 30 years of courtroom experience. His office walls were covered with certificates and photographs from cases he had won, including several high-profile estate disputes. "This is a mess," Marcus said after reviewing my case files. "Your previous counsel did almost nothing to prepare your defense. Worse than nothing, actually. Some of these filings are so weak they make you look guilty." He spread the documents across his conference table and began pointing out the problems. "Angela's team has painted you as an opportunistic vulture who preyed on an elderly woman's loneliness. They have character witnesses lined up to testify that you isolated your grandmother from her family. They even have financial records suggesting you borrowed money from her repeatedly over the years." "That's not true," I protested. "I never borrowed money from Grandma Ruth. If anything, I was the one helping her with home repairs and maintenance." "I believe you," Marcus said, "but believing you and proving you in court are two different things. Angela has been building this case for months, while your previous attorney was actively sabotaging your defense. The next few weeks became a nightmare of legal preparation mixed with personal destruction. Angela had been busy spreading her version of events throughout our small community in Southeast Portland. She told neighbors that I had been living off our grandmother's money for years, that I had pressured her into changing her will, that I represented a danger to elderly people everywhere. My construction business began falling apart as word spread about the family dispute. Partners who had worked with me for years started distancing themselves, worried that associating with someone accused of elder abuse would damage their own reputations. 3 major projects were canceled, and my crew began looking for other work. The worst part was watching my parents turn against me completely. Frank and Margaret visited my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, sitting uncomfortably on my secondhand couch while delivering their ultimatum. "Son, we think you need to do the right thing here." My father said, his voice carrying the same disappointed tone he had used when I got in trouble as a teenager. "Give Angela the house and end this legal battle before it destroys our family completely." "Dad, I'm telling you the truth," I pleaded. "Grandma Ruth left me the house because she wanted me to have it. She made that decision with a clear mind after years of watching how we all treated her." My mother shook her head sadly. "Donald, Angela has shown us some very disturbing things. She has proof that you borrowed over $20,000 from your grandmother in the past 5 years. She has witnesses who will testify that you told people your grandmother was getting senile and couldn't manage her own affairs. The accusations were so twisted and false that I could barely process them. Mom, I never said any of those things. I never borrowed money from Grandma Ruth. Angela is lying to you." But I could see they had already made up their minds. Angela had been feeding them carefully crafted stories for months, building a narrative that portrayed me as manipulative and untrustworthy. She had even convinced them that I had gambling debts and was desperate for money to pay them off. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment trying to understand how my entire life had been turned upside down. My girlfriend Jennifer had broken up with me the week before, saying she couldn't handle the stress and uncertainty. My construction crew had abandoned me for more stable work. My own parents believed I was a criminal. Then Marcus called with even worse news. During his investigation, he had discovered that Angela had been intercepting my mail for months. She had been going to the post office with forged documents claiming I had moved and requested mail forwarding to her address. Critical legal documents that would have helped my case had been stolen before I ever saw them. "She's been planning this for over 2 years, Marcus explained during our emergency meeting. "Ever since your grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, Angela has been building her case while systematically isolating you from potential support. That night, I drove past the house on Cedar Lane and saw lights in every window. Angela had illegally changed the locks and moved in, treating the property as if she already owned it. Her car sat in the driveway next to a moving truck, and I could see her directing workers as they carried furniture inside. When I tried to approach the front door, Angela called the police and claimed I was threatening her. By the time the officers arrived, she had restraining order paperwork ready, complete with detailed allegations about my violent tendencies and erratic behavior. Standing on the sidewalk outside my grandmother's house, being treated like a criminal by police officers who should have been protecting my property rights, I realized that Angela hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She had stolen my entire life. The preliminary court hearing became a showcase for Angela's manipulation tactics. Bradley Patterson presented their case with theatrical precision, painting me as a dangerous predator who had systematically exploited a vulnerable elderly woman. Your Honor, Bradley began, his voice carrying the kind of practiced sincerity that expensive legal training provides. The evidence will show that Donald Morrison engaged in a calculated campaign to isolate Ruth Morrison from her loving family convincing her that only he cared about her welfare. I sat beside Marcus Thompson at the defendant's table, watching my life be dismantled through carefully selected lies and half-truths. Angela had assembled an impressive collection of forged documents that seemed to prove I had borrowed money from Grandma Ruth on multiple occasions. Bank records showed withdrawals from her account that coincided with deposits into mine, creating a paper trail that looked damning to anyone who didn't know the full context. The character witnesses Angela brought forward were people I barely knew, neighbors, and church acquaintances who claimed I had made disturbing comments about my grandmother's mental state. Mrs. Henderson from the house next door testified that I had told her Grandma Ruth was losing her mind and couldn't be trusted to manage her own affairs. He said she was getting confused about money. Mrs. Henderson declared from the witness stand, her gray hair perfectly styled and her voice filled with righteous indignation. He said someone needed to help her make better decisions before she gave everything away to strangers. The testimony was completely fabricated. I had never had such a conversation with Mrs. Henderson or anyone else, but she delivered her lines with convincing emotion, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue as she described her concern for my poor grandmother. Even worse was watching my parents testify against me. Frank took the stand wearing his best suit, the same one he wore to church every Sunday, and spoke about his fears for my mental stability. Donald has always been different from our other children, my father said, avoiding eye contact with me as he spoke. He's been angry and resentful since childhood. Angela has shown us evidence that he owes money to dangerous people, and we're worried he might hurt someone if he doesn't get what he wants. Margaret followed with her own testimony describing late-night phone calls where I allegedly threatened family members and made concerning statements about getting what I deserved. Her voice broke as she claimed a fear for her safety around her own son. Neither of my parents had ever received threatening phone calls from me. Neither had ever expressed concern about my mental health or violent tendencies. But they delivered their testimony with absolute conviction, having been so thoroughly convinced by Angela's manipulation that they genuinely believed their own lies. Marcus did his best to cross-examine the witnesses, but we were fighting an uphill battle with limited preparation time. He managed to poke some holes in their stories, getting Mrs. Henderson to admit she couldn't remember specific dates for our alleged conversations, and forcing my father to acknowledge that he had no direct evidence of my supposed gambling debts. But the damage was already done. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a stern woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, listened to each testimony with an increasingly troubled expression. When she looked at me, I could see the suspicion in her eyes. During a recess, I stepped outside the courthouse for air and immediately saw Jennifer across the street. My ex-girlfriend was standing by her car, apparently having witnessed at least part of the proceedings. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt a flash of hope that she might have realized the truth about Angela's manipulation. Instead, she got in her car and drove away without acknowledging me. That evening, Marcus and I met at his office to review the disaster. The preliminary hearing had gone exactly as Angela planned, establishing a public record of my alleged unfitness, while positioning her as the responsible family member trying to protect everyone from my dangerous instability. "We're in serious trouble," Marcus admitted, loosening his tie and pouring himself a glass of whiskey from the bottle he kept in his desk drawer. "The judge is clearly sympathetic to their narrative. Unless we can produce some compelling counter-evidence, you're going to lose everything." My construction business was now completely destroyed. The last of my crew had found other work after my picture appeared in the Portland Tribune, alongside an article about the heated family dispute over my grandmother's will. The article repeated Angela's accusations without bothering to investigate my side of the story, describing me as a disgruntled construction worker, fighting his successful marketing executive sister for control of valuable real estate. Social media made everything worse. Angela had been posting carefully crafted updates about the legal battle, positioning herself as the victim of my greed, while garnering sympathy from hundreds of friends and colleagues. Her Facebook posts showed pictures of her tearfully embracing our parents, with captions about standing strong against family manipulation and protecting elderly loved ones from predators. The comments on her posts were uniformly supportive, filled with expressions of outrage at my behavior and praise for Angela's courage in standing up to me. Several people shared stories about their own experiences with greedy relatives who had taken advantage of elderly family members. Meanwhile, my own social media presence became toxic overnight. Former friends and business associates began unfriending me, and the few people who commented on my posts did so with skepticism or outright hostility. I finally deleted all my accounts rather than continue reading speculation about my character and motives. Angela's victory celebration was particularly painful to witness. She threw a housewarming party at the Cedar Lane house, inviting dozens of people to celebrate her new home. The party was covered by Portland Society blogger, who posted pictures of Angela graciously hosting guests in the beautifully maintained house that my grandmother had loved so much. In the photos, Angela looked radiant and confident, surrounded by friends and family who supported her fight against her troubled brother. She had already begun redecorating, replacing my grandmother's antique furniture with modern pieces that reflected her sophisticated taste. The final blow came when Marcus discovered the extent of Angela's mail theft scheme. She had been intercepting not just my legal correspondence, but also business documents that would have proven my financial stability and character. Construction contracts, payment records, client testimonials, bank statements showing my legitimate income. All had been diverted to Angela's address, where she could use them to build her case against me. She's been planning this for over 2 years, Marcus explained, spreading the evidence across his conference table. Every piece of her case has been carefully constructed using information she stole from you. She knows exactly how much money you make, which clients you work for, even what you spend your money on. Looking at the pile of stolen mail, I realized that Angela hadn't just been building a legal case. She had been conducting comprehensive surveillance on my entire life, gathering ammunition for the character assassination she was now executing with surgical precision. As I sat in Marcus's office that night, surrounded by evidence of my sister's systematic betrayal, I understood that this battle was about much more than a house or an inheritance. Angela was trying to destroy me, completely erasing my identity and relationships so thoroughly that I would have nothing left, even if I somehow won the legal fight. But what she didn't know was that our grandmother had taught me more than just carpentry and home repair. Ruth Morrison had also taught me patient strategy and the importance of keeping your most important cards hidden until the moment was right to play them. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday morning when Marcus received a call from Harold Peterson, the attorney who had originally handled Grandma Ruth's estate planning. Harold was a distinguished man in his 70s who had practiced law in Portland for over 4 decades, representing some of the city's oldest families through multiple generations. "I've been following the newspaper coverage of your case," Harold told Marcus over the phone, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen countless family disputes. "I think it's time we opened the sealed documents Ruth Morrison left in my care." Marcus immediately drove to Harold's office in the historic Multnomah Athletic Club building, taking me along to witness whatever revelations awaited us. Harold's office was a study in old-fashioned legal practice, with leather-bound law books lining mahogany shelves and family photographs spanning decades of successful representations. Ruth Morrison was one of the shrewdest people I ever represented. Harold began settling into the wingback chair behind his massive desk. She anticipated that her will might be contested, particularly by Angela, so she prepared countermeasures. He produced a sealed manila envelope marked with specific instructions to be opened only if Ruth Morrison's will is contested in court by any family member. Inside were documents that would change everything about the legal battle and reveal truths that none of us had suspected. The first document was a detailed letter written by my grandmother, 6 months before her death, describing her reasons for leaving me the house and explaining her concerns about Angela's character. But more importantly, it contained information about financial arrangements she had made that neither my parents nor my siblings knew about. Donald Geitingt, Harold read from the letter, has been helping me manage my investments for the past 7 years. What his family doesn't understand is that he has been earning his own success through hard work and smart decisions. The money he deposited into his accounts wasn't borrowed from me. It was payment for legitimate business partnerships we maintained together. The letter went on to explain that when I turned 25, Grandma Ruth had secretly helped me purchase my first investment property by providing the down payment in exchange for a partnership agreement. Over the following 7 years, we had worked together to build a small real estate portfolio, with me handling the physical improvements and property management, while she provided business guidance and additional capital. I taught Donald everything I learned about investing during my 40 years running Morrison's Flowers. The letter continued. He has the same instincts for recognizing undervalued assets and the same patience to wait for the right opportunities. What appears to outsiders as gambling or risky behavior is actually careful strategic planning. Harold produced bank records and property deeds that proved every word of my grandmother's letter. The borrowed money that Angela had used as evidence of my financial instability was actually documented payments for my share of profits from our joint real estate ventures. Property records showed that I had been quietly building wealth over the past 7 years, purchasing distressed properties throughout Portland and the surrounding suburbs, renovating them myself using skills I had learned working construction, and either renting them for steady income or selling them for substantial profits. Marcus spread the documents across Harold's conference table, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement as he realized the scope of what we were seeing. Donald, do you understand what this means? You're not just the rightful heir to your grandmother's house. You're a legitimate real estate investor with a substantial portfolio. The property documentation revealed investments I had made throughout the Portland metropolitan area. A duplex in the Selwood neighborhood that I had purchased for $85,000 and renovated into a property worth $160,000. A small apartment building near Portland State University that generated $42,000 annually in rental income. A commercial property in the Alberta Arts District that I had converted into artist studios, providing affordable workspace for the local creative community while generating steady returns. Your grandmother was incredibly proud of your success, Harold explained, pulling out additional correspondence. She wrote to me regularly about your business decisions and your character. She said you had inherited her eye for opportunity and her commitment to community development. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Harold produced a final set of documents that made Marcus whistle in amazement and caused my head to spin with disbelief. Ruth Morrison also left you the mineral rights to 3 properties your grandmother's family owned in eastern Oregon. Harold announced spreading geological survey maps across the table. Properties that have recently been discovered to contain significant natural gas deposits. The gas rights were worth potentially millions of dollars, depending on how much could be extracted from the deposits. Energy companies had been quietly buying up mineral rights throughout the region, and preliminary geological surveys suggested that my grandmother's properties sat directly above some of the most promising formations. She knew about the gas potential. I asked, trying to process this incredible information. Ruth Morrison knew about a lot of things, Harold replied with a slight smile. She spent 40 years networking with Portland's business community through her flower shop. She heard things, she paid attention, and she made very smart, long-term investments. Marcus began calculating the potential value of my assets, factoring in the real estate portfolio, the rental income, the appreciation on properties I had improved, and the speculative value of the natural gas rights. Donald, you're not poor. You're not even middle class. You're wealthy. The irony was overwhelming. Angela had been fighting to take control of what she thought was a single property worth maybe $400,000. Instead, she had been trying to steal an inheritance that was worth well over $2 million from someone who had already built substantial wealth on his own. "Why didn't Grandma Ruth tell me about all this?" I asked Harold. "Because she wanted to see what kind of person you would become without knowing you had a safety net," he replied. "She wanted to make sure your success was based on character and hard work, not dependency on family wealth. According to her letters, you exceeded every expectation she had." As we prepared to leave Harold's office with boxes of documentation that would revolutionize my court case, I felt a mixture of vindication and profound sadness. My grandmother had been secretly proud of my accomplishments for years, documenting my growth as both a businessman and a person. She had watched me build success through integrity and perseverance, never knowing that her faith in me was being recorded for posterity. But she had also watched her other grandchildren develop in directions that disappointed her. Angela's materialism and manipulation, Tyler's detachment from family responsibilities, my parents' favoritism and poor judgment, all had been observed and quietly noted by a woman who understood human nature better than any of us realized. "She loved all of you," Harold said as we packed up the documents, "but she trusted only you to carry on her legacy of hard work and community investment. Everything she did was designed to protect that legacy and make sure it went to someone who would honor it." Walking back to Marcus's car with evidence that would destroy Angela's case and reveal my true financial position, I realized that the battle was about to shift dramatically in my favor. But I also understood that winning in court would be only the beginning of healing the damage that this family war had caused. The question now was whether my family would be able to accept the truth about who I really was and what I had accomplished, or whether Angela's lies had poisoned those relationships permanently. The property tour began at 7 o'clock on a crisp Thursday morning in downtown Portland. Marcus Thompson had arranged for a court-appointed appraiser to document my real estate holdings, creating an official record that would be presented as evidence in the final hearing. Our first stop was the apartment building I owned near Portland State University, a 4-unit complex I had purchased 3 years earlier for $240,000. The building had been in rough condition when I bought it, with outdated plumbing, worn carpeting, and a heating system that barely functioned. I spent 6 months renovating this place myself. I explained to the appraiser a professional woman named Carol Jang, who worked for the county assessor's office. New electrical, throughout modern heating and cooling hardwood floors, updated kitchens and bathrooms. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a rundown property that previous landlords used to house transient tenants had become attractive housing for graduate students and young professionals. The apartments featured exposed brick walls, stainless steel appliances, and large windows that filled the spaces with natural light. "Current rental income?" Carol asked, making notes on her tablet. $42,000 annually, I replied. "All 4 units have been consistently occupied for the past 2 years. I keep rents slightly below market rate because I prefer stable, long-term tenants over maximum profit." Carol walked through each unit, documenting the improvements and calculating the current market value. The building that I had purchased for less than $250,000 was now worth approximately $420,000, nearly doubling my initial investment while providing steady income. Our second stop was the duplex in the Selwood neighborhood, a charming property near the Willamette River that I had completely transformed from a neglected rental into an attractive home for 2 families. The duplex sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees and a small garden that I had landscaped myself. This was my first major project after Grandma Ruth and I became partners. I told Marcus as we toured the property. She provided the down payment and I did all the renovation work. We split the profits 50-50 until her death, when her share reverted to me. The duplex housed 2 teachers from the local elementary school, women in their 30s, who had been renting from me for over 2 years. They had decorated their porches with flower boxes and string lights, creating the kind of stable community environment that I tried to foster in all my properties. Sarah and Jennifer love living here, I explained to Carol. I keep their rent affordable because good tenants are worth more than maximum profits. They take care of the property like it's their own home. The property had cost me $85,000 initially and was now valued at over $170,000. More importantly, it represented the kind of community investment that my grandmother had always encouraged, providing quality housing at reasonable prices while building long-term wealth through careful property management. Our third stop was the commercial property in the Alberta Arts District, a converted warehouse that I had purchased 2 years earlier and transformed into affordable artist studios. The building buzzed with creative energy as painters, sculptors, jewelry makers, and photographers worked in spaces that I had carefully designed to provide maximum natural light and proper ventilation. Donald saved our entire art community, said Maria Santos, a ceramicist who rented one of the larger studios. When the old warehouse got torn down for condos, we thought we'd have to leave Portland entirely. These studios let us stay and continue our work. I had purchased the building for $130,000 when it was slated for demolition. Instead of flipping it for quick profit, I had invested another $60,000 in renovations that created 12 individual studios, plus a common area where artists could collaborate and display their work. Rental income covers the mortgage and maintenance, I explained to Carol, but the real value is what this space means to the community. Portland's creative scene needs affordable workspace, and I'm proud to provide it. The property was now valued at nearly $300,000, but its importance to the local arts community made it worth far more than its financial value. Several of the artists had gone on to achieve national recognition, and they frequently credited the affordable studio space with enabling their success. Our fourth stop was a mountain cabin near Mount Hood that I had rescued from foreclosure and converted into a vacation rental. The property sat on 5 acres of forested land, with a creek running through the back corner and views of the mountain from the wraparound deck that I had built myself. This place books solid year-round, I told Carol as we toured the interior. Families and summer snowboarders and winter couples looking for romantic getaways during the shoulder seasons. The cabin had required extensive structural work when I bought it for $75,000. I had replaced the roof, updated the electrical and plumbing systems, and added modern amenities while preserving the rustic charm that guests loved. The property now generated approximately $30,000 annually in rental income and was valued at over $200,000. We continued the tour throughout the day, visiting property after property that told the story of 7 years of careful investment and hard work. A small house in the Woodstock neighborhood that I had converted into a duplex, providing housing for a retired couple and a young family starting their lives together. A commercial building downtown that housed a successful bakery, with the business owner praising my responsiveness as a landlord and my fair rental policies. Donald fixed our plumbing emergency at midnight on a Sunday, said Rebecca Martinez, who owned the bakery. He didn't charge extra for emergency service, and he made sure we could open for business Monday morning. You don't find landlords like that very often. We visited the farmland outside Portland that I leased to organic farmers, the beachfront cottage that I had restored after storm damage, and the warehouse space that I had converted into artist studios. Each property represented not just financial investment, but community involvement and relationship building. Marcus and Carol began tallying the numbers as we finished the tour. 12 properties total, including the family home that had started this entire legal battle. Current market value approaching $3 million. Annual rental income exceeding $120,000. Total net worth, after mortgages and expenses, well over $2 million. Donald, Mary, here, Marcus said as we sat in his car outside the final property. Do you understand what this means for your court case? Angela has been painting you as a deadbeat construction worker who manipulated an elderly woman. Instead, you're one of the most successful young real estate investors in Portland. But the most satisfying part of the day wasn't the financial documentation. It was seeing the community I had helped build through careful property investment and ethical business practices. Tenants who trusted me, artists who depended on me, business owners who respected me, all people whose lives had been positively affected by the work I had been doing quietly, while my family dismissed me as unsuccessful. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud, Carol commented as she completed her final calculations. This isn't just real estate investment. This is community development done right. That evening, Marcus called with news that would change the entire dynamic of our legal battle. Angela's attorney, Bradley Patterson, had requested an emergency meeting claiming he had information that might lead to a settlement. He knows, Marcus explained. Someone leaked information about your property holdings, and Bradley realizes that Angela has been lying to him about your financial situation. He's probably worried about his professional reputation if this case goes to trial. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning, but I already knew I wasn't interested in a quick settlement. For months, Angela had been destroying my reputation and relationships through systematic lies and manipulation. My parents believed I was dangerous. My former girlfriend thought I was unstable. My business relationships had been damaged by false accusations. It was time for the truth to come out completely in public court proceedings where Angela's lies could be exposed and my actual character could be vindicated. The money and property were important, but my reputation and relationships mattered even more. The war was about to shift decisively in my favor, and I intended to see it through to complete victory. Bradley Patterson looked uncomfortable as he sat across from Marcus and me in the conference room at Thompson Legal Services. The same attorney who had been so confident during the preliminary hearings now fidgeted with his pen and avoided direct eye contact. My client is interested in resolving this matter outside of court. Bradley began, his voice lacking its usual prosecutorial confidence. Angela feels that perhaps the family has been through enough stress and she's willing to discuss a reasonable settlement. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled coldly. What kind of settlement did she have in mind? A 50-50 split of the estate, Bradley replied quickly. Angela keeps the house. Donald keeps whatever other assets your grandmother left him. Clean break, no hard feelings. I almost laughed out loud. No hard feelings. Your client has spent months destroying my reputation, turning my family against me, stealing my mail, and falsely accusing me of elder abuse. And now she wants to negotiate? Bradley's discomfort became more obvious. Look, I've recently learned that there may have been some misunderstandings about Donald's financial situation. Angela might have been given incomplete information when she decided to contest the will. Incomplete information, Marcus repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling perjury and fraud now? The truth was that Bradley had discovered exactly how badly he had been misled by his client. Word had leaked about my property holdings through the courthouse appraisal process, and Bradley now understood that he had been building his case on completely false premises. I think this meeting is over, I said, standing up and heading for the door. See you in court, Bradley. But Marcus had other plans. Instead of accepting Bradley's settlement offer, he filed countersuit against Angela for fraud, defamation, theft of mail, and intentional interference with my business relationships. The countersuit was extensive, documenting every lie Angela had told, every document she had forged, and every relationship she had poisoned with her systematic campaign of character assassination. The Portland Tribune picked up the story the next day with a headline that made me smile. Marketing executive accused of elaborate fraud in family estate battle. The article detailed Angela's scheme to steal mail-forged documents and manipulate family members in her attempt to overturn our grandmother's will. The response from the community was immediate and dramatic. My construction crew contacted me within hours of the article's publication, apologizing for abandoning me and offering to return to work immediately. Several of them admitted they had never really believed Angela's accusations, but had been afraid to risk their own reputations by associating with me during the legal battle. "We knew you weren't the kind of person she was describing," said Tom Rodriguez, my lead carpenter and friend for over 5 years. "But we had families to feed and we couldn't afford to lose work if the rumors were true." Property owners throughout Portland began reaching out with renovation projects and investment opportunities. Apparently, the revelation that I was a successful real estate investor rather than a struggling construction worker had completely changed how people viewed my business prospects. Even more satisfying was the reaction from my tenants and business partners. Maria Santos from the Artist Studios organized a letter-writing campaign to the Tribune with dozens of artists, small business owners, and renters defending my character and describing the positive impact I had made on their lives. "Donald Morrison saved Portland's creative community," Maria wrote in a published letter to the editor. "When developers were pricing artists out of the city, he provided affordable workspace that allowed us to stay and thrive. He's exactly the kind of landlord and community member we need more of." The most shocking development came when the district attorney's office announced they were investigating Angela for mail theft and fraud. Marcus had presented such compelling evidence of her systematic crimes that prosecutors felt obligated to pursue criminal charges. Angela's attempt to flee became the final nail in her coffin. Portland police arrested her at the airport with 2 suitcases full of valuable family heirlooms she had stolen from the Cedar Lane house. Antique jewelry that had belonged to my great-grandmother, rare books from my grandfather's collection, even the silver tea service that Grandma Ruth had treasured, all packed carefully in Angela's luggage as she attempted to board a flight to Los Angeles. She was planning to disappear, Marcus explained after the arrest. Our investigation revealed that she had been moving money into offshore accounts and making arrangements to relocate permanently to California. The arrest photos showed Angela in handcuffs, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, and her designer clothing wrinkled. The same woman who had looked so composed and confident during the early court hearings now appeared desperate and defeated. Bradley Patterson formally withdrew as her counsel the next day, issuing a statement that distanced his firm from Angela's criminal behavior. "We were misled by our client about fundamental facts in this case," his statement read. "Had we known the truth about Ms. Morrison's activities, we would never have taken this representation. But the most meaningful vindication came from unexpected sources. Tyler flew back from medical school immediately after reading about Angela's arrest, seeking me out for a conversation that had been years overdue. "Donald, I owe you a massive apology," my younger brother said when he showed up at my apartment that evening. "Angela has been lying to all of us for months, and I was stupid enough to believe her. Tyler had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to stay neutral during conflicts between his siblings. But Angela's manipulation had forced him to choose sides, and he was ashamed of the choice he had made. She told me you were jealous of my medical school success," Tyler continued. "She said you resented having to work construction while I was getting an education. She made it sound like you were bitter and angry about everything." "Tyler, I'm proud of your success," I told him honestly. "I always have been. You're going to be a great doctor." "That's what makes this worse," Tyler replied, tears forming in his eyes. "Angela also told me that you had been talking about dropping out of college because you couldn't afford it. She never mentioned that someone had mysteriously paid off all my loans." The conversation stretched late into the night as Tyler and I rebuilt the relationship that Angela's lies had nearly destroyed. He promised to testify on my behalf during the final court proceedings, and he committed to helping repair the damage that had been done to our family relationships. Jennifer called the next morning, her voice hesitant and apologetic. "Donald, I've been reading the news coverage and I need to talk to you. I think I made a terrible mistake." We met for coffee at a downtown Portland cafe, Neutral Territory, where we could have an honest conversation about what had happened between us. Jennifer looked tired and stressed, wearing the same worried expression I had seen so often during the final weeks of our relationship. Angela called me repeatedly after we broke up. Jennifer admitted, stirring her latte nervously. She kept telling me stories about your financial problems and your anger issues. She said you had threatened family members and that she was worried about everyone's safety. The revelation that Angela had been actively working to destroy my romantic relationship was somehow more hurtful than all the legal and financial manipulation. It showed the depth of her determination to isolate me completely from any source of personal support. I should have trusted what I knew about you instead of listening to her, Jennifer continued. We dated for 2 years. I knew you weren't violent or unstable, but she was so convincing and the legal problems seemed to confirm everything she was saying. Our conversation lasted for hours as we worked through the damage that Angela's manipulation had caused. Jennifer wanted to rebuild our relationship, but I needed time to process how easily she had abandoned me when I needed support most. I understand if you can't forgive me, Jennifer said as we prepared to leave, but I want you to know that I never stopped caring about you even when I thought you might be dangerous. That's why it hurt so much to walk away. The final court hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, exactly 8 months after this nightmare had begun. But instead of facing the proceedings alone and defenseless, I now had a team of supporters, a mountain of evidence, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was finally within reach. Angela's elaborate scheme was crumbling completely, and soon the entire world would know the truth about who I really was and what I had actually accomplished. The courthouse was packed on Monday morning for the final hearing in Morrison versus Morrison. Judge Patricia Reynolds took her seat with an expression of stern disapproval, having reviewed all the evidence that had emerged since Angela's arrest and the revelation of my true financial status. Before we proceed, Judge Reynolds began, her voice carrying the weight of 40 years on the bench. I want to address the criminal charges that have been filed against the plaintiff in this case. Miss Angela Morrison has been arrested for mail theft, fraud, and conspiracy. While those charges will be handled in criminal court, they are directly relevant to the credibility issues we face in this probate dispute. Angela sat at the plaintiff's table with her new court-appointed attorney, looking nothing like the confident marketing executive who had started this battle 8 months earlier. Her designer suits had been replaced by a simple gray dress, and her perfectly styled hair hung limply around her shoulders. The weight of her crumbling lies had taken a visible toll on her appearance and demeanor. Marcus stood to present our evidence, beginning with Harold Peterson's testimony about the sealed documents that revealed my 7-year business partnership with our grandmother. Harold, dignified and authoritative in his navy suit, explained how Ruth Morrison had carefully planned her estate to reward the grandchild who had shown the most character and business sense. Ruth Morrison was not a confused elderly woman being manipulated by her grandson, Harold testified. She was a sharp businesswoman who had watched her 3 grandchildren grow up and made deliberate choices about who should carry on her legacy of hard work and community investment. The property documentation was presented next with Carol Jang from the county assessor's office, providing detailed appraisals of my 12-property portfolio. The courtroom murmured with surprise as the full scope of my real estate holdings was revealed, showing total assets worth nearly $3 million. The defendant is not a struggling construction worker who needed to manipulate his grandmother for money, Marcus explained to the court. Donald Morrison is one of Portland's most successful young real estate investors, someone who has built substantial wealth through ethical business practices and community development. Tyler took the stand as a character witness, his medical school uniform lending credibility to his testimony. My brother Donald has been secretly supporting our entire family for years. Tyler said, his voice clear and confident. When I couldn't figure out how my student loans were getting paid, I thought I had received some kind of anonymous scholarship. It was actually Donald using his own money to help me become a doctor. The revelation that I had been anonymously funding Tyler's education while being accused of financial instability created a dramatic moment in the courtroom. Several people in the gallery shook their heads in disbelief at the irony of Angela's accusations. Maria Santos testified about the artist studios I had created, describing how my investment had saved Portland's creative community when developers were pricing artists out of the city. Donald Morrison didn't just buy our building, Maria explained to the court. He created affordable workspace that allows dozens of artists to continue living and working in Portland. He's exactly the kind of community leader this city needs. Rebecca Martinez from the bakery testified about my character as a landlord, describing how I had responded to emergency repairs and maintained fair rent policies even when I could have charged market rates. Donald has always prioritized good tenant relationships over maximum profits, Rebecca told the judge. He's the most ethical businessman I've ever worked with. Tom Rodriguez. My construction crew leader testified about my work ethic and integrity in business relationships. Donald Morrison is the most honest contractor in Portland, Tom declared. In 5 years of working with him, I've never seen him cut corners or treat anyone unfairly. He's the kind of person who makes this industry better for everyone. But the most powerful testimony came from my parents, who had been forced to confront the truth about their daughter's manipulation and their son's actual character. Frank and Margaret took the stand together, their faces showing the shame and regret that came with realizing how badly they had misjudged their own children. We were completely wrong about our son, Frank testified, his voice breaking with emotion. Angela convinced us that Donald was dangerous and unstable, but the truth is that he's been quietly supporting our family and building a successful business while we ignored his accomplishments. Margaret's testimony was even more heartbreaking. I failed as a mother, she admitted through tears. I believed my daughter's lies instead of trusting the son who had always shown us nothing but love and respect. Donald deserved our support, and we gave it to the child who was deceiving us. Angela's new attorney attempted to present a defense, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The stolen mail, forged documents, and false testimony had created a legal disaster that no competent lawyer could overcome. Judge Reynolds called for a brief recess before delivering her verdict, and during the break, Angela approached me in the courthouse hallway. Her once confident demeanor had been replaced by desperate remorse. "Donald, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was jealous of your success and angry that Grandma Ruth chose you over me. I thought I deserved the inheritance because I was the oldest and most successful, but I was wrong about everything." The apology felt hollow after 8 months of systematic character assassination, but I could see genuine remorse in her eyes. "Angela, you didn't just try to steal my inheritance. You tried to destroy my entire life." "I know," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "I convinced myself that you were the problem, that you had somehow cheated or manipulated your way to success. But the truth is that you earned everything you have through hard work and good character. And I couldn't stand that my little brother had accomplished more than I had." When court reconvened, Judge Reynolds delivered a verdict that was both comprehensive and scathing. This case represents one of the most egregious examples of family manipulation and legal fraud I have encountered in 4 decades on the bench, she began. The evidence clearly shows that Ruth Morrison's will was the product of careful consideration by a competent woman who understood her grandchildren's characters better than they understood themselves. Donald Morrison is the rightful heir to his grandmother's estate, and any attempt to overturn that will, based on false accusations of undue influence, is hereby rejected. Judge Reynolds then addressed Angela directly. "Ms. Morrison, your behavior in this case has been reprehensible. You have committed multiple felonies in your attempt to steal your brother's inheritance, and you have systematically destroyed family relationships through deliberate lies and manipulation. This court finds you liable for all legal costs in this matter, plus punitive damages for the emotional distress you have caused." The financial penalties imposed on Angela were severe. In addition to paying all court costs and attorney fees, she was ordered to pay $200,000 in damages for defamation and emotional distress. The criminal charges would be handled separately, but she faced potential prison time for the mail theft and fraud charges. As we left the courthouse that afternoon, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost to my family relationships had been enormous. Angela would likely serve time in prison. My parents would have to live with the knowledge that they had betrayed their son based on lies. Tyler and I could rebuild our relationship, but it would take years to fully repair the damage that had been done. The local media coverage was extensive, with headlines praising the successful young entrepreneur who had been vindicated against false accusations. The Portland Tribune ran a follow-up story about my real estate investments and community development work, positioning me as an example of ethical business practices in the city's growing economy. 6 months later, Angela completed her sentence of 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service. She also attended mandatory counseling for her manipulation and control issues. When she was released, she requested a meeting to make amends. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you and to our family," Angela said when we met at a neutral location downtown. "I realize now that my jealousy and need to control everything around me made me into a person I don't want to be." The conversation was difficult but necessary. Angela had genuinely changed during her legal troubles, forced to confront the destructive patterns that had driven her to such extreme behavior. She was working with a therapist to understand why she had felt so threatened by my success and so entitled to control our family's resources. "I don't expect forgiveness," Angela continued, "but I want you to know that I'm committed to becoming a better person, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the damage I caused." Frank and Margaret had been working on rebuilding their relationship with me as well, attending family counseling, to understand how they had been manipulated and why they had chosen to believe Angela's lies over their own observations about my character. "We were lazy parents," Frank admitted during one of our counseling sessions. "It was easier to believe Angela's explanations than to dig deeper and understand what was really happening in our family. The family healing process was slow and sometimes painful, but it was genuine. My parents had to confront their own biases and favoritism, while Angela had to take responsibility for the systematic campaign of destruction she had waged against me. Tyler became one of my strongest supporters, often telling people about the secret financial help I had provided for his education. My brother Donald taught me that real success isn't about what you accumulate, Tyler would say. It's about how you help other people achieve their own success. Jennifer and I eventually reconciled as well, though it took months of rebuilding trust before we could move forward with our relationship. She had learned painful lessons about the importance of standing by the people you love, even when circumstances make it difficult to see the truth. "I promise I'll never abandon you again when things get tough," Jennifer told me, as we became engaged 18 months after the court case ended. I learned that real love means believing in someone's character, even when everything else seems to contradict it. The business consequences of the legal battle turned out to be overwhelmingly positive. Once the truth about my success became public knowledge, property owners throughout Portland and the surrounding areas began seeking me out for investment partnerships and development projects. I used the increased opportunities to expand my community development work, creating additional affordable artist spaces, investing in sustainable housing projects, and providing business mentorship to other young entrepreneurs who were trying to build ethical companies. The scholarship fund I established in Grandma Ruth's name became one of my most meaningful projects. Every year, we provide full college tuition to 3 working-class students who demonstrate both academic potential and strong character. The selection committee includes my parents, Tyler, and even Angela, who wanted to contribute to something positive after the damage she had caused. Warkikim. Ruth Morrison believed that education and hard work could transform lives. I said during the scholarship program's first award ceremony. She taught me that real wealth comes from using your success to create opportunities for other people. Standing in the restored Cedar Lane house, where my grandmother had taught me so much about life, business, and character, surrounded by family members who had learned painful lessons about loyalty and truth, I realized that the legal battle had ultimately made all of us stronger and wiser. Angela had tried to destroy me through lies and manipulation, but instead she had forced me to reveal the success I had been building quietly for years. She had tried to isolate me from my family, but instead, she had taught all of us the importance of supporting each other through difficult times. Most importantly, the entire experience had proven the wisdom of the life lessons my grandmother had tried to teach me. Integrity, hard work, community investment, and patient planning had not only brought financial success, but had also created the foundation for a meaningful life that could survive even the most determined attacks. As I looked around the room at my family gathered for our first peaceful dinner in over 2 years, I thought about what Grandma Ruth would have said about our journey through this crisis. Sometimes the people who try to tear you down end up helping you discover how strong you really are, she might have observed with her characteristic insight. And sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important lessons about who deserves your trust. The house on Cedar Lane was finally officially mine. But more importantly, the family that had been broken apart by lies and jealousy was slowly healing and learning to appreciate the bonds that really mattered. Have you ever had to fight for something you knew was rightfully yours, while people you trusted turned against you? How did you find the strength to keep believing in yourself when everyone else seemed to doubt you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding justice. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might be facing similar challenges in their own family relationships. Thank you for listening to Donald's incredible journey from betrayal to triumph. May we all have the wisdom to recognize the difference between people who genuinely care about us and those who only want to control us. Until next time, remember that the truth always finds a way to surface, and integrity is the foundation of any success worth having.